Nothing in the Lou Bridges Show is intended to be legal analysis, legal advice, or legal recommendations that would be applicable to your particular situation. Everyone in foreclosure or underwater with their mortgage are encouraged to seek legal counsel for a review of your specific situation. Welcome to the weekly broadcast of the Lou Bridges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history that created it. Are you in foreclosure, at risk of foreclosure, or underwater with your mortgage? Do you know someone who is? Every week on this show, you'll get real answers from a real attorney. Lou Bridges will explain options in the foreclosure process. He'll talk about defective mortgages, mortgage restructuring, loan modification, short sale negotiation, and discuss what to look for when choosing a foreclosure defense attorney. Lou is an experienced foreclosure defense lawyer on the front lines of mortgage defense and litigation. Lou is dedicated to helping you keep your property. And now, it's time for the Lou Bridges Show and the truth about foreclosure. Here's your host, Lou Bridges.
Good morning, Chicago. Lou Bridges here. Another beautiful Saturday morning on the Lou Bridges Show. I have my wingman, Mike Main.
Good morning, Chicagoland.
My producer, Debbie Schreiber. And, you know, the introduction, he says the greatest financial crime in history. It's the greatest financial crime spree or crime wave in history that was perpetrated by the mortgage industry from 1998 to 2008. The mortgage industry that was being led by the Wall Street investment bankers that were bundling and packaging mortgage-backed securities, artificially driving up the price of American real estate by 131%, which created $5.5 trillion of additional capital that was bundled and packaged and sold primarily to public employee pension funds. And today it continues because the servicers, the major banks that service mortgages, the 12 major banks that service about 99% of the residential mortgages in this country, are making humongous profits on the foreclosure business because the mortgages have been paid off, either by the private mortgage insurance, the credit default swap, or the government guarantees. The privately securitized mortgages have been paid off. And just this past week, anyone who doubts that this crime wave is continuing is not following the news. Now, we have people that do nothing but follow the news around the country, so perhaps I'm expecting too much when I want everyone to be aware of this and know about this, and that's one of the reasons we do this show, is to spread. We summarize the developments and news around the country, and everything we say on this show is fully documented, cross-referenced, cross-checked by a team of researchers that we have at my law firm. But this past week, the Chicago Tribune reports, U.S. can pursue cases against bank mortgages over abuses in the foreclosure process. Now, these abuses in the foreclosure processes are frauds upon the court. Let's call them what they are. Reuters is reporting, judge to banks, no limits on the Fannie Mae mortgage-backed securities cases. You see, these mortgage banks not only defrauded the investors, they defrauded the United States government, but most of all, they defrauded the American people. And there were 56 million residential mortgages in this country. There are estimates that 20 million are either in foreclosure or underwater. So if you're in foreclosure or you're underwater, you are not alone. Believe me, by any stretch. That's almost 40% of the mortgages in this country are still underwater. And there's no relief in sight. Bank of America is offering principal reductions of up to $200,000 for homeowners. We have achieved for a number of homeowners principal reductions of up to $100,000. I haven't got one for $200,000 yet, but we've received a number of up to, we did have one a little over $100,000. And that is the key. If you're underwater, you need to get principal reduction. Everyone keeps saying to me, Lou, all these reports, and it's very interesting about what the banks are doing and how the major bank servicers are perpetrating these frauds upon the court and how they don't own the mortgages and how they're profiting. The report this week, $3.3 billion per year Wells Fargo is making as a profit on the foreclosure. 20% of their profit is on foreclosures because, again, these banks don't own the mortgage. They are the servicer. The mortgage is either owned by Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or a private trust, in this case of a securitized mortgage. About 50% each. And the private trust that owns a mortgage, in the case of a privately securitized mortgage, which is most of the mortgages originated by Washington Mutual or Countrywide or any of those others that are no longer in business because of the misdeeds they perpetrated in the origination of the mortgage. But these mortgages that were privately securitized have been paid off either by the private mortgage insurance, the credit default swap, or the government guarantee that was given for these. So why is there a foreclosure? And it also begs the question, well, if the note's been paid off, how is there a default? A mortgage is a security interest to secure payment of a note. If the note has been paid off, then how could there be a foreclosure? And what's the purpose of it? They've already had the note paid. And that's a very good question that is raising some legal concerns, but that'll be something in the months to come. What it came out this past week is that the banks that are foreclosing, these servicing banks, are not forwarding any of the money to the investors because the investors have been paid off. They're pocketing the money they're making money on foreclosures. It's one of their biggest money-making things now. That is why all the modification efforts by the government, the modification programs, the HAMP and everything have been abject failures. The servicers have been sabotaging things. But that is changing now because it's all coming out. And it's what we've been saying for 4 years now. Eventually the truth will come to the surface and will have to be recognized. Because that's the strength of the truth, the transcendent power of the truth. Every lie requires 3 lies to cover it up. That's generally. And every one of those 3 more and 3 more. And the lies are so piling up now that it's coming out and it's being recognized in courts around the country. Now, we got 2 paralegals that do nothing but monitor court developments around the country, collect the cases, report them to the attorneys, and we review them for use in Illinois. And there was 2 cases this past week, one out of a bankruptcy court in Texas by a federal bankruptcy judge, and the other by an appellate court judge in New York, which basically said what my partner Scott O and I have been saying, and along with all the others, Professor Adam Levitin at Georgetown University, the leading academic authority, Neil Garfeld, Max Gardner, Jeff Barnes, and all the leading academicians on the University of Cincinnati Law Review article, all the leading academic analysis is that the servicing banks they're not entitled to foreclose because the mortgage has been paid off and they're just pocketing the money as a profit. They're not forwarding it to the investor. And it's a profit-making enterprises, and they don't have the standing because if the mortgage wasn't transferred to the trust properly, then it wasn't transferred to the trust. It's not a voidable transfer. It was void. This gets into a very complex laws involving securitization laws and trust law of New York. But the vast majority of mortgages that were securitized, which is about half the mortgages that were originated between 1998 and 2008, were not properly securitized. There was a failed securitization. Somebody still owns a note, a mortgage, probably a special purpose vehicle, an SPV as we call it in the industry, that was created from the transfers from the originator to the trust. But the SPV doesn't have a service agreement with the party that's foreclosing, which means the foreclosure is wrongful. The bank that's foreclosing, the Wells Fargo, Chase, Citi, U.S. Bank, whoever is foreclosing very likely has no interest in the mortgage and doesn't have a right to foreclose. And the courts are starting to recognize that. Now, what does this mean for me? The secretary said, your show is really great. It's very interesting. But I imagine a lot of people are saying, well, Lou, that's you're bringing this out. You're disclosing. You and many others are revealing this great financial crime wave that's being perpetrated by the major banks in our country. But what's in it for me? Well, stay tuned and we'll talk about what this means to you if you're underwater or you're facing foreclosure. But as we start out every show, I want to read the warning that was given to us by one of the greatest men who ever lived, Thomas Jefferson, one of our founding fathers. And he warned us about this. He warned us about what's going on today. In 1802, Thomas Jefferson, our country is not more than 20 years old. 25, we count 1776 as the start. But Thomas Jefferson wrote for future generations, ours in particular. He wrote, I believe the banking institutions are more dangerous to our liberties than standing armies. If the American people ever allow the private banks to control the issue of currency, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around the banks will deprive the people of all their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. You see, Thomas Jefferson recognized, he foresaw what is happening today. Standing armies are not our problem because we all have, but it's the banks, the major banks, and I'm not talking about your local mom and pop banks and your face savings and loans and your credit unions. They were all squeezed out of the mortgage business by the 12 major banks servicing this country. And they have already taken over the Office of Control of the Currency. They virtually control the Fed. And that is the danger that is more dangerous than a standing army. They are depriving the American people of their property, their real property. Thomas Jefferson was a big follower of Jonathan Locke, the philosopher Jonathan Locke, who philosophized that property, real estate, the land, and liberty are inextricably bound. If you have land, you have liberty. If you have liberty, you have the right to own land. When you take away the land, you take away the liberty. And it's time for Americans to stand up and say no to these big banks. If you are underwater or fighting foreclosure, you can do your part by fighting the foreclosure and demanding a restructuring of your loan. That is a reduction of the principal balance to reflect the true fair market value of the property. That's what every American's entitled to, not some inflated mortgage that puts them underwater. Stick to Ace Tune, and we'll talk about what's in it for you.
Join us
I'm
at
Lou Bridges.
Join us at Facebook.
Welcome back to the Lou Bridges Show with Louis Bridges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back, Chicago. That roar that you heard at the end of the last segment was I had not given my wingman enough time and to give his announcement. So, with no further ado, Mike, what did you?
I'd like you all to join us at facebook.com/The Lou Bridges Show. Please be sure to like it, engage with us. You can ask us questions that we may ask on the air. That is Bridges with a Y, not an I. As well, if you have questions, please feel free to give us a call, 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231.
All right. Thank you, Mike. And when we left you the last segment, we were talking about this great financial crime wave that is continuing and how the banks are making, in the case of Wells Fargo, but the reports $3.3 billion per year in foreclosures. You keep in mind, the servicing bank is a servicer. They don't own the mortgage. It's owned by either the Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, or a private securitized trust. All of which, in the case of the private securitized trust, the mortgage has been paid off. The servicing banks are profiting, and they're profiting by committing frauds upon the court, and this is coming out left and right around the country. Now, we admittedly have people that do nothing but monitor the news around the country, every website and every sort of source that's legitimate that reports on this, including all the law review articles and the academic community, the legal academic community. But just some of these reports, I want to, before we go into what's in it for you and what this means to you if you're underwater or facing foreclosure or in foreclosure or even been foreclosed upon, but there's possibly still some relief. Just some of the news reports here. Chicago Tribune this past week, the United States can pursue a case against the Bank of America over mortgages, and this is the False Claims Act, which the Bank of America had certified to the government that these mortgages were originated in accordance with the requirements of the federal government, when in fact they were not, and they knew they were not. And that affects what's in it for you, because the chances are, if your mortgage was originated between 1998 and 2008, it was done so based on many errors and omissions that are violations of law. You were unlawfully induced into signing that noted mortgage for more than the property is worth. Bank of America, and a related story, perhaps, is offering up to 200,000 principal reductions to 200,000 homeowners. That's a start. There's still 20 million that are underwater. They're not all Bank of America serviced loans, but a good portion of them are. That it will be the wave. And that's why now is the time where I really suggest that you consult a knowledgeable foreclosure defense attorney. And, if it's not us, we'll give you the names of some other people. We always will give people the names of other firms that are doing what we're doing, because it's just important that everyone be represented. And we'll tell you a little later in the show what to look for in hiring a foreclosure defense attorney. And if you're out there and you're an attorney and you're kind of, know that there's something you should be doing for clients and you feel bad for these clients and you've taken the case on, but, you're a general practitioner and you've got a lot of other areas you're working in, we will help other attorneys. We will work there alongside of you. We won't take over the client. You'll still be your client. We'll help you because we know how to do this. And we know And we've got a whole program of people that are applying for the modifications and the restructurings. We got attorneys that are defending the cases and filing affirmative defenses and discovery and counterclaims. And we're working with the banks. We have investors that'll maybe buy out the bank and lease the property back to the homeowner for 2 years and then sell the property back for a fair market value. There's a number of options, but you have to hold on to the land, people. Never give up the land. Getting back to the related news stories, judge to banks, New York, no limits on the Fannie Freddie mortgage-backed security cases. The government suing these major bank servicers. House panel probes FHA after learning the losses could reach $115 billion. Heirs. Those of you who have been getting checks as part of the so-called independent mortgage foreclosure review, you're getting a check for $500 up to $2,000. We have some discovery that we've put together, which the banks just tell you you're receiving this check as a result of deficiencies in the foreclosure process or servicing of your loan. That's a quote. Deficiencies. Well, what exactly are these deficiencies that you're all of a sudden out of the blue sending me a check for as much as $2,000? They won't tell you that. They give you a bunch of numbers to call for free information. We've had people call, all different kinds of people in our office call. And we have clients. We've had clients call. We've called. Not one iota of information has been uncovered. They've all been told, we can't tell you that. There's nothing we know about that. These numbers are just there. It's a dog and pony show, people. But there was something that was found in the independent foreclosure review. And I know what it is, and I have an idea what it is, but I need to confirm that. So we have put together some discovery, and we are going to find out. And the judges around, and we have cases in 11 counties. Actually, I think it's 12 now. We took a case out in Boone County now. So we've got cases in the 12 county Chicago areas, and we've got enough attorneys to cover them. But the judges are now allowing us to conduct this discovery, saying, our client got this check and this cover letter, and they've been pursuing foreclosure, but apparently that they found out something. They haven't told their attorneys. They haven't told their foreclosure mill attorneys. So we need to find out. I say to the judge, I want to know what's if I found out. I would think that the plaintiff's foreclosure mill attorney would want to know what abuse of the foreclosure process his client committed, that he's probably a part of. And I know you, Judge, want to know because it happened in your courtroom, or you ought to want to know. Because the fact is that the judiciary is starting to realize that they've been the victims as much as the American people, perhaps more so, because it's their duty not to be the victim. It's their duty to ferret out the truth. And by allowing default judgments and refusing to vacate default judgments and just kind of giving the banks every benefit of every doubt on all occasions, as they do in some jurisdictions that I will not name on this show, but I think they know who I'm talking about. These jurisdictions have been doing a great disservice to their constituency, the judges of these jurisdictions. The people of the state of Illinois did not constitute a government or did not constitute the courts of this country to be foreclosure mills. They constituted them to be halls of justice. Justice follows the truth. And the truth is that their vast majority of the foreclosures are based on fabricated documents, forged documents, robo-signed documents, or some other deficiency. There's gaps in the chain of title. There's failed securitization. There was fraud in the origination of the mortgage. There was fraud in the appraisal. There was something. This situation did not come about because 20 million American families woke up one morning and decided to commit bank fraud that day. There's no such thing as a liar loan, or there's a very few handful of liar loans. But the vast majority of the 20 million American families that are either facing foreclosure, have been foreclosed upon, or are underwater did not get to that situation because of something they did wrong. They were the victims of the greatest financial crime spree in history, and this is documented. And if you don't follow the news and you don't recognize this, then you're not doing your job. And that is what is coming out. And the judges around the country are recognizing this and realizing this. And it's getting exciting. I've been fighting this battle for 4 years now, and the tide is turning. What's this mean for you? If you're underwater in a mortgage, if you're facing foreclosure, if you're in foreclosure, if there's been a judgment entered, if you have an attorney representing you that doesn't seem to really know, but he's to be a good attorney, he's doing everything he can, but There is a way. We defend cases based on a thorough investigation by a mortgage industry specialist, somebody with 30 years or more experience in the mortgage industry. We examine everything from the solicitation, application, the processing of the application, the closing, the servicing of the loan, the securitization, the transfers, the recording, the title, the wording, the notice of acceleration, the notice of the default, everything. I have yet to find one in which there weren't multiple errors. And we've examined probably over close to 1,000 residential home mortgages that were originated in the Chicago area. We have yet to find, well, no, I take that back. There have been a few that were originated by the old traditional way by a local bank, by one of your Harris banks or somebody like that. And we didn't find any problem there. We called the client. But any bank mortgage that was originated by one of these mortgage originators, these Countrywide, these Taylor Bead Financials, these Washington Mutuals, or any of the like, all of which, by the way, are no longer in business because of the frauds they committed upon the American people in the origination of the mortgages. And any mortgage that is serviced by any of the 12 major bank servicers, there is very likely multiple defects from the very outset. And I mean violations of laws and federal regulations. So, it's time to stand up and fight these banks. Thomas Jefferson's warning was not a prophecy of what will definitely occur. He says if the American people ever allow the private banks to control things, then the corporations and the banks that will grow up, the banks and the corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property. I'm Lou Bridges. Stick with us. We'll talk some more about what you can do. Mike May, my sidekick.
Bridges of the law firm Bridges & O & Associates, one of the leading foreclosure defense firms in the Chicago area, rejoins you now on the Lou Bridges Show. Here's Lou on how you might avoid foreclosure and deal with a mortgage that's underwater.
Hey, I'm back. Lou Bridges here, and we're continuing with our news segment. We're going to need a separate hour just for the news because it gets more and more every week. Huffington Post reports too big to jail dogs about a Justice Department as government documents raise questions. You see, the documents, lies are going to eventually fail because every lie requires 3 lies to cover it up. And that's why the truth is the transcendent invincible force. In my view, it takes some time for sometimes the truth to come out. But, these documents are proving that these bankers and these mortgage managers and the investment banks that put together the mortgage-backed securities all knew what they're doing and all knew that they were ripping off the American people for $5.5 trillion. And why none of them are going to jail? There's actually a couple that have gone to jail. The former head of Taylor Bean Financial, the big mortgage originator, and Angela Mazzillo avoided paying, the head of Countrywide avoided going to jail by paying a $78 million fine. And the government was so proud. We put Countrywide out of business, and Angela Mazzillo paid a $78 million fine for all the fraud that was perpetrated on the American people in the origination of mortgages. Angela Mazzillo just kind of smiled and paid, and the government had a big blow-up of the $78 million check that he wrote. And Angela Mazzillo, while the government was doing their press conference announcing the $78 million fine that he paid, was getting on one of his fleet of private jets to go to one of his fleet of 4 homes offshore in tax havens like Cayman Islands and the like, Costa Rica. And it was announced that Countrywide had agreed to pay him a $478 million bonus that year on top of his salary. So the $78 million fine, you see, was just, it's just typical of the government ineffectual and it just failure to understand the magnitude of this crime. It
was a real deterrent.
Yeah. I mean, he'll never do that again, I'll bet. He'll never have to do it again. He'll never have to work again a day in his life. His biggest job is to figure out what to do with the interest he's making out of the money he stole. Living Lies reports that New York is considering a law criminalizing every person who participates in the fraudulent foreclosures. That's certainly going to put a little... causing a few sleepless nights to my friends in the foreclosure mill law firms. I told one of them the other day, I said, he's a good guy and they're just doing their job, or they think they are, but they don't get it. And I said, Raj, you don't want to be the one holding the notary seal when the FBI bursts in the door. Banks, Living Lies also reports banks are hedging their bets on wrongful foreclosures. They know they made wrongful foreclosures. They know they've been perpetrating a crime, but you know what? We're too big to fail. And if we're too big to fail, well, we're too big to jail. And that's the attitude. And if that's what you want, American people, then you can let it happen. Or you cannot. And I know what the American people are going to do. They're going to stand up and they're going to fight for truth and justice because that's what they've always done. You see, that can go over here. That can go over in other countries. Well, at least it's never in the past been able to happen here. And I believe there are still heroes left. The there's many senators that want to abolish Fannie Mae, shrink the U.S. backstop. Meanwhile, the April numbers for foreclosures in Chicago are in, and the foreclosure auctions are on the rise. And from what I've seen, the foreclosure filings are not falling either. Now, we're having tremendous listenership, and I really appreciate all the listener support and response. I know that this is my duty to do this because we're doing we put together a very good foreclosure defense firm. Foreclosure defense firm. And we've been helping a lot of people get restructuring of their mortgages and helping them get modifications and helping them, or if they want to sell and move out, helping them sell with no deficiency, and maybe even we can get them relocation expenses. We've been helping people however we can because I have an attitude: if you find something you're good at and you help other people doing it, then you're either going to make money or you're not. But at least if you're helping other people, you got that going for you. And as it turns out, you do. There's money to be made in helping other people. And we're spending the money on, shows like this and trying to spread the word. We will help other attorneys defend you. We will help tell you what to look for in hiring a foreclosure defense attorney. We give everybody who qualifies a free consultation, usually up to an hour. And that's either Scott O. or myself, not an associate attorney, but either the two named partners, Scott O. or myself, Bridges O. and Associates. Our associate attorneys are very learned, and we require them to spend an hour a night every day, 5 nights a week studying and keeping up on things. We have paralegals that keep up on all the developments. We have people that handle the modifications. We have with principal reductions. And we have the biggest thing is the wing thing about I demand in our firm is every phone call, every email, every inquiry must be responded to by somebody within 24 hours. The response may be, the attorney hasn't been able to get to your question. He will get to you, and he will give you an analysis or response to your question. And then within another 24 hours, somebody else gets back to you. But every single call, every single email must be responded to in 24 hours. Mike's going to give you a couple of sites here where you can look to.
Main one being facebook.com/TheLouBrydgesShow. That's where you can engage with us here for the show, find out information that may help you. Telephone number, if you want to call, ask questions, is 224-513-1231. And the Bridges & O website is FightIllinoisForeclosures.com.
I'm Lou Bridges. Stick back with us. Mike's going to have a couple of questions we received from some of our viewers. And thank you again for all the support. It really means something to me.
It's from our listeners, by the way.
Yeah, it's more from you listeners. From you folks.
We now return to the Lou Bridges Show, telling the truth about the foreclosure crisis and the greatest financial crime in history. Here's Lou Bridges, an attorney on the front lines of the ongoing battle for our land.
Hello, thank you back, listeners. That's greatest financial crime wave in history that continues to this day, being perpetrated by the major bank servicers. This is our listener question session, and these are a couple questions from the past week that listeners have sent in. And Mike, I'll let you, without any further ado, go ahead with the questions.
And just a quick reminder, facebook.com/The Lou Bridges Show. That's Bridges with a Y, The Lou Bridges Show. Feel free to ask any questions there. We may get them on the air here for you, and 224-513-1231. So the first question here is, I have a home with more than one mortgage. The primary mortgage is less than the house is worth. However, when you total the loans, I'm significantly underwater, I should say. What can I do?
Well, we have a number of approaches to a situation like that. And one of them is, we try to get everybody in a situation where you've got one loan that is, less than the fair market value of the property, so that you've got some equity in the property. In that instance, that's a hard case because, quite frankly, there's no reason for the first loan, which is fully secured by this property, to do anything. Other than the fact that there is the risk of, because you are underwater, you have the option. It is not illegal to breach a contract, and there are consequences that have been agreed upon, which means that parties anticipated that there may be a situation in which I have to breach the contract. On the second mortgage, when you're underwater, if you're in financial difficulty and can't make that payment and you're severely underwater, then we need to try to open a dialogue with them about resolving that situation, because that's not a tenable situation. Now, that may also involve the first. What we'd like to see happen there is a total refinance with something in the neighborhood of 90%. We pay off the first and give the second, some percentage based on how much underwater and everything, and then end up with one mortgage for about 90 to 95% of fair market value of the property. You've got some equity. And because, if you're underwater and you're paying the taxes, you're really paying the taxes on something that you have no ownership interest in. And if you're, way underwater with just one mortgage, as so many people are, you're really in a bad situation. And a modification is not the answer. Only a restructuring is the answer. And that may involve something called a strategic default. And it's not necessarily a default. We call it a suspension of payments while we renegotiate a restructuring of the loan, because it just doesn't make any financial sense to continue to service a mortgage when you're, significantly more than about 20% underwater. And if you owe $250,000 on a house that's got a fair market value of $150,000, you're 25 plus years away from having $1 of ownership interest in that property. And yet you're paying the taxes on the property, and by being $100,000 underwater, you're overpaying by almost $1,000 per month to live in the property. Not quite $1,000, about $750 a month, depending on, the size of the mortgage and everything, but just as a rule of thumb. That doesn't make any sense. You're depriving your kids, yourself, of a life. And the reason you're there isn't because of some cyclical downturn in the mortgage or in the housing market. No. It's because there was an artificial bubble created by the Wall Street investment banks for the very purpose that they accomplished, and that is to deprive the American people of their property and to create $5.5 trillion of artificial illusory capital that they could convert to cash and run away with. So don't get me started. What's the second question?
Okay. I owe much less than my house is worth, yet I can't pay my current mortgage. Do you have a suggestion for my situation?
Well, it depends on how old you are. If you're, this is a situation, I believe this is from a retired listener.
That actually is, yes.
Yeah, okay. The retired listener is no longer working and living on Social Security now, and, with all the other, costs of living and everything, they have equity in the property, but they just can't afford to pay the mortgage and the taxes every month. So, well, there is a solution. It's called a reverse mortgage, and you've probably heard about those. And those, I know a lot of elderly people have, immediately I've had someone say, I don't want to hear anything about a reverse mortgage. It makes no sense, and I don't want to even hear about it. Well, I'm sorry, but if you don't want to hear, then I can't help you. I will not advise or, sell you anything. I would advise you of the pros and cons from a legal standpoint. And for most people, over the age of 62, if you've got at least, some equity in the property, then paying, and if you don't want to leave it to, if you don't have any children that you want to leave the house to, or grandchildren you want to leave the house to, or somebody else, then a reverse mortgage is the options are something you should consider. I would venture, and I could explain to you the legal aspects of a reverse mortgage, and we can refer you to a couple of people. There's a friend of ours, Dan Frio, who is just excellent at the reverse mortgages, does an outstanding job. And I can't, endorse anybody, but I can give you the names of some people that, based on my experience, are engaged in this, and you can listen to them, and I'll advise you from a legal standpoint. But if you are elderly and you're on Social Security and you're having a hard time making the monthly payments on a mortgage, and you've got some equity in the property that you've built up due to your sweat and payments and diligent payments over the years, a reverse mortgage may be something you definitely want to consider. So anyway, we're getting close to the end of this segment. We've got one more segment in which we're going to wrap things up on. And again, if you have questions, please send them. And please, if you have comments, if you have negative comments, send them. If you have some suggestions how we might make the show better, some questions, some areas you might want us to cover, some specific questions you want to ask, or you just want to, if you want a free consultation by either Scott or myself, my partner, then give us a call, and Mike's going to give you some contact information here. And please stick with us for our final segment where we wrap up.
Facebook.com/TheLouBrydgesShow. That's Bridges with a Y, 224-513-1231. And you can also go to our website at fightillinoisforeclosures.com.
This, by the way, is the Battle of Evermore by Sandy Denny is the female singer in this. She died very young, and she was I was a real fan of hers, and this is a great tune.
Welcome back to the Lou Bridges Show with Louis Bridges, one of Chicago's leading foreclosure defense attorneys. Here's Lou to tell you what to look for when hiring a foreclosure defense attorney and how to avoid being conned on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back to the Lou Bridges Show, and you're one of the growing numbers of Americans that are recognizing that the major banks of this country are doing what Thomas Jefferson warned us they would do, and they're attempting to deprive the American people of their property, so their children wake up homeless on the land, their continent their fathers conquered. And there's a growing movement in this country, and it's very exciting to be a part of. It's very exciting to have been part of it now for over 4 years, and to be in it from the outset. And things are starting to. Times were tough in the beginning. It was, these banks, they have all these commercials on television where they show the happy, smiling family, playing golf and, laying back in their hammock on their beautiful house. And the bank says, we can make this affordable. And yeah, they do a lot of PR, but you got to remember something about corporations. And this was pointed out to me by a law school buddy of mine I bumped into and seen in about 30 years. We talked about what we were doing. He said, well, Lou, corporations have no heart. By definition, they are a heartless soul. Everything they will do will be for the profit. And that's the truth. I mean, they may engage in philanthropic events and have, sponsor, marathons in Chicago. They're not doing that out of the goodness of their heart. They don't have a heart. They're a corporation. They're doing it because it's good PR and it gets them more business. So don't be misled by these major banks. These major banks are criminal enterprises, and that's been. And sue me if I'm defaming you, because you all have been found to have committed criminal acts. You haven't been prosecuted, but that's coming. All right. The major banks in this country that are servicing mortgages have all been found to have engaged in frauds upon the court, robo-signing, fabrication of documents, forged documents. There's failed securitization. They're just the servicer of the mortgage. And, okay, Mike is pointing to me. He says, yeah, a lot of people say, Lou, this is wonderful what you're doing about exposing or being part of this movement, exposing the banks, the major banks who are taking over the country. They've taken over the Office of Control of Currency. But, Lou, what can I do? Or, more importantly, some people say, what's in it for me? Well, what's in it for you as a country in which you're a free country, because the land and liberty are inextricably bound. But what can you do to save the land? You can fight a foreclosure. If you're underwater, there's the option of a strategic default or a suspension of payments until the mortgage is renegotiated so that you've got some equity in the property, which is in the better interests of the actual owner of the mortgage. The owner is in a better position having a fully secured note, performing note, fully secured by a mortgage on a real estate that is worth more than the note than they are in foreclosing. Nationwide statistics, the owner of the mortgage will 2 to 3 to 4 years down the road realize about 45 to 55 cents of fair market value in a foreclosure situation because of all the costs involved. A restructuring of an underwater mortgage right now and turning it in tomorrow into a performing note mortgage, a performing note secured by a mortgage, this is why you need to fight the foreclosure. This is why you need, if you're underwater, to ask for, demand a restructuring. This is why you need adequate representation. And if you're out there, we'll give you a free consultation. And if you're a lawyer out there representing people, trying to do your best, but you're not real sure about what you're doing, call us. We'll help you out, too. The Lou Bridges Show. Thank you for joining us.
You've been listening to the weekly radio broadcast of the Lou Bridges Show with attorney Louis Bridges, telling the truth about foreclosure. Have you received threats of foreclosure? Are you in a foreclosure right now, seeking a loan modification, considering strategic default, or any other legal action? Know and protect your rights, and do not give up the land. Lou Bridges' passion is to help you keep your home and achieve your legal goals. To receive a free consultation, which may help you decide how to defend against foreclosure, understand your options, and learn what to look for in choosing a foreclosure defense attorney, call 224-513-1231. That's 224-513-1231. or visit FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. That's FightIllinoisForeclosures.com. Get real answers from a real foreclosure defense firm and discover the legal tools at your disposal. Tune in to AM 560 The Answer next Saturday morning at 8 for The Lou Bridges Show, telling the truth